Carol, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me and the Blind Spots audience today. I know how busy you are, so really appreciate you making some space for us.
Brian, there is always time in my schedule for you.
Oh, thanks so much. How's the weather in downtown Boston today? It looks beautiful out the window there. The light anyway coming through.
Yeah, it is lovely today. It's cooler, it's dry. It's probably the best spot in the USA today.
Well, it's definitely hot down in Texas, Arizona area. I'm glad I'm not there for sure. Let's kind of start by talking a little bit about the some of the work that we've done together in the past. When we launched Double Check, now Clue, Rapid7 was one of our first clients. You were the former chief marketing officer, of course, of Rapid7. You already know that, but for the audience. And you believed in this concept of being able to collect data from buyers and share that information across the organization. Now you moved into board member roles at many different companies. So I'd love to maybe get a little bit of insight from you into kind of the time machine view of win-loss as a chief marketing officer. Tell me about your relationship with win-loss, why you felt it was important at the time.
Yeah, I've always thought it's really important because you want to win, right? You want you want your product to be adopted by and loved by customers, because that's why you build it, right? You want to solve problems for people. And so if you don't get selected, you obviously don't get that wonderful opportunity to be the product of choice and the thing that helps a customer achieve their goal. But, from a real practical standpoint, I've always found it's really important because it can be, it's a great way to assess things that you might need to improve on. So, for example, you might uncover that your marketing messaging isn't really working that well and it's not setting sales up for success. You might uncover that you really have some issues with sales enablement and training. There's certain things that are the team is really struggling with, not adopting. They may not be even adopting the sales methodology, for example, that you've put in place. And you can uncover some of those things, I think, with a really good win-loss. But it also can be a really great leading indicator, right? Because you can get some early warning signs if you're doing a good regular win-loss program. So, for example, you might uncover that a competitor has a new product that perhaps they haven't even announced, but they're starting to show it to customers and tip the scales in their favor by perhaps, in the lingo of sales, setting traps for you as a vendor, because saying like, wow, XYZ company doesn't have this particular capability, and that's really important, if you want to achieve the goals you're trying to achieve, right? And you can get those signs, I think, out of win-loss, or if you're having pricing problems, right? Sometimes, companies don't take sales seriously when they say, listen, we're overpriced, right? And we're losing, and our competitors are discounting. They're like, you're just trying to make things easier for yourself. But maybe not. Maybe the competitors really are trying to trash the market, and you can get some early warning signs from that. So I've always felt it's really important. And I think it's very important to not just do it only on the deals that make it all the way to the end. You got to find out too, why are you getting kicked out early? Why did you not even make the short list? If the customer talked to you very early on when they were canvassing the market, what was it about your marketing, your selling, your product, whatever it might be, that sort of kicked you out and didn't get you to that short list stage, right? So I think it's really important to be monitoring what's working and what's really the point of view of the customer. And you learn that from win-loss.
I love that you use the word monitoring, because I think a lot of people will start off with a win-loss project and they have some sort of question to answer, and it could be around pricing or it could be around some sort of competitive intelligence. Maybe they're hearing something, as you had mentioned, about new products being launched or something along those lines. But I think that monitoring word is key here, because we have seen that companies who really take win-loss seriously look at it more programmatically, and it's ongoing. There's no end to their win-loss effort. It's just, it changes, right? It evolves over time. It becomes agile. So What is your view on that? It sounds like, you can stumble upon things along the way, right? But how do you look at it from a programmatic perspective versus a project?
Yeah, I absolutely think it is a programmatic thing. And I can see it starting as a project. And if it does, that's great. But once you see what you learn, it's hard to imagine you wouldn't want to keep doing it, because especially those leading indicators are those things you learn. So, I don't want to reveal anything about any particular company, but I do know, places like Rapid7 and other places where we had a programmatic approach, we might see sort of new competitors creep in that we weren't seeing before. And maybe they don't compete with us directly, but they're on the fringes. And so it starts to tell us something about customers who maybe don't have a super strong need for our product, but have some need, and they're able to find some substitute product that is not a direct competitor, another solution in the cybersecurity space perhaps has added, vulnerability management-like capabilities. And you're not going to lose a lot to somebody like that, but maybe you start to see them creep in a little bit, right? You get that early warning sign and gives you an opportunity to do something about it if you want to, right? To think about, how do we arm the sales force? How might we adjust our messaging? Are there things we could be doing product-wise? Is this going to be a big future competitor, or really just something that sort of operates around the fringes? So I think the programmatic approach is very important to those leading indicators and detecting things that are changing in your market.
And then when you start to sense those things happening and changing, there's a question about how much data do you need to be able to decide to respond? And I think some people get caught up, they need a lot of data to move the ship to make any sort of change or decision or investment. Others they hear something once and they're like, oh, we need to act on that. What is your view? How much data do you think is enough to be able to say, okay, we need to go after that particular competitor based on what we've heard?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's hard to say there's just sort of one thing, right? You're sort of combining the win-loss data with other information you have. So, for example, if you've been hearing something about pricing, but you only see it in one example, you might say, why don't we just go get some objective, information about this? This doesn't seem to be a huge issue. You might want to see that in a couple of different cases, because you might have, one rogue sales rep who
sure
discounted, much more than the company even allows them to, and therefore you lost the deal to them. So I think it's a matter of thinking about, what are you hearing through the win-loss? What are you hearing through other channels, and how do you combine that together to go, this is enough.
Correct.
This is enough information. I don't need 30 customers saying, the same thing. These 5, along with everything else I know, is giving me the information I need. And maybe you're finding out that pricing isn't an issue everywhere. Maybe it's only an issue in the education market, or, so it really depends on the particular situation, how much information you have. But I think the thing you must avoid is not being, paralyzed by not having enough information and constantly going, I need more, I need more, I need more. If that's happening, you might want to rethink your process a little bit.
It was a tricky question I threw out to you. You handled it very, very well, because it's, it is, I guess it depends on the information. It depends on the source of that information as well. And a lot of people will layer in sales input. I know that we often will look at those reason codes and kind of scratch our head whether or not the reason codes selected are actually the real reason why a deal was won or lost. But what other sources, you mentioned, looking at other sources as well. What other sources would you typically lean into when combining it with maybe what you're hearing in a win-loss interview?
Yeah, so a couple different things. One is, yes, the sales team themselves. What are they saying about a particular issue? If you work with analyst firms like a Forrester or a Gartner, they can be a source of information. Obviously, you're also monitoring press releases that a company is putting out, or doing a little bit of shopping, at trade shows and events. You might also, if you sell through a channel, you might be hearing things through your channel partners that can be corroborating evidence or, indications that something you picked up on in even one or two win-loss reports is an indication that there's a shift in the market and a shift in a feature that's catching buyers' attention or pricing or, whatever it might be. So I think those are some of the other sources that you can be looking at and listening to.
And then let's kind of move the discussion along to your position on various boards within various technology companies. And now, CMO experience, but now you're kind of sitting there helping these leadership teams understand how to improve their go-to-market strategy, looking at data from different sources. What have you found in working with them as it relates to their understanding of competitive intelligence and buyer intelligence? Do you find they have a good handle on it, or in general, do you feel like they need work in those areas?
I do find that a lot of companies are not taking that systematic approach, and especially in the last year or two, when most companies have seen a little bit of a slowing of growth rates, things like that, it's been a much more difficult environment than the years leading up until the pandemic, right? So people have been dealing with a lot of uncertainty, and so the people they're trying to sell to are uncertain, and
right.
Deals are moving slower and things like that. And so, as a board member, you're often asking, well, what are you really hearing? And sometimes it's very anecdotal, but there's not always that systematic piece of information. And the other reason it's so critical is, we always want to know how we can improve go-to-market. And one of the ways you can improve your go-to-market is getting really smart about why buyers buy, why buyers use and are happy with your product, and why and when they aren't. So just like win-loss, you really want to understand win-loss of renewals as well, if
right.
you're in a business where you have renewals. Because again, that can be an early warning sign, of something going awry in your business. And as a board member, you're trying to reduce risk in the business, right? You're really responsible for protecting shareholders, right? And part of that is really understanding the risks in the business. And I think win-loss plays into that go-to-market risk. Do we have go-to-market risk? Do we have product risk? Do we have market dynamic risk? And win-loss, I think, can be really important to understanding that.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see over the past year and a half or so, board members and investment firms shining a bit of a spotlight on win-loss, and especially on that churn side. Companies coming in with low NRR numbers, much lower than they could have ever imagined. And the board wants some additional answers. So with the win-loss interview focused on churn, they tend to get some answers to that. But also just in general, we're seeing a lot more venture capital firms, private equity firms, just wanting more out of their leadership teams during board meetings. And it seems like those leadership teams are often turning to win-loss as one of those primary sources of intelligence to help satisfy ultimately the need of the board, so the boards can help point them in the right direction. When you look at actioning data at the leadership team level, working with boards, do you find that once you kind of get the data together with them, or they get the data together and present it back to you, like, are there typically a lot of actions that are taken from board meeting to board meeting based on the data, or not? I mean, I'm trying to paint the picture of the actionability of the insights at that level.
Yeah, no, I think there is. I think that there's, I think sometimes teams are challenged with presenting the data without the right context.
Yeah.
Even as you said, sometimes you'll see NRR numbers going down, or a higher level of churn. And often, as a board member, you'll ask questions about that. Why? What's driving it? And sometimes the answers you get are rather unsatisfactory.
Yeah.
That usually leads to homework from the team to come back and explain, that they have a command of that they understand what's happening. The other thing that happens with the story is, or the data, is often it's disconnected from each other. So, you might have not so much related to win-loss, but you've got pipeline data and you've got marketing leads data, and board members are often saying, I don't understand how leads necessarily relate to pipeline or lack of pipeline or, whatever it might be. And people are not always connecting the dots all the way through to say, we have command of our entire go-to-market process, and let us help you understand from beginning to end where we are, what's going well, what's not going well, and how it all connects together. Board members often leave a board meeting scratching their head a little bit like, they said this was going well and this wasn't going well, and then I don't understand how these things connect to each other. And so I think teams need to really think through making sure they're providing the right context about any information that they're sharing. So, for example, if you share win-loss data, don't just share the win-loss data. Help the board understand what it means. What are you going to do about it, right? There's no reason to have win-loss data just to have it. Like, you should be using it to help you make decisions and take action in your business. And I think if you're presenting that data to your board, you should be able to talk about those things with them so they know, what are you going to do about this?
Well, it's interesting because it's a big challenge that we see with organizations where they have every intent on acting on the data that's being collected, but they just can't get it together, to be able to do that in a organized, operationalized manner. So problems persist. And this is a tricky time too, because of the turnover, I guess, at the leadership team level, with different heads of product marketing or competitive intelligence or different go-to-market roles that are coming in and out of the organization, which makes it more difficult to act on that intelligence and be able to follow through with tracking the impact of those actions. So this is just more of an advice question when you're thinking about the work that you do with organizations or roles that you've been in the past, working with leadership teams. What is the silver bullet, right? Or to be able to get teams to really move the ball forward on acting? Is it like a racy chart type approach to, what is it? What is it exactly that they could do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it sort of starts with setting it up the project. Like, I'm a really big believer in this for almost everything, which is, if I'm going to be doing something, let's establish before I start, why am I going to do it? So why am I doing this? What am I hoping to learn? What do I think the outcome should be? And in the case of an information project, and what am I going to do with the data? I may not know the exact decisions I'm going to make, but if I start to lay that out ahead of time, and I can be clear, even if it is a racy chart about, great, well then who owns those different pieces? Then I can go back to that when I get the data in and start to say, like, okay, so we said we were going to look at this data and we were going to make the following decisions off it. What did we learn? What are our next steps? I think really focusing on that and having someone manage that project to make sure that there is something happening from it becomes, very important. For example, I work with a lot of really small companies as well. And one of the reasons I really like win-loss data is because sometimes part of the problem in an early stage company is that they're focused on the wrong customers. They haven't really nailed down who their ideal customer profile is. And so the sales team is trying to sell to everyone.
Right.
And that can be very inefficient, right? So one of the outcomes might be, we're doing this to really deeply understand who is our ideal customer profile, and then start to shift our sales and marketing to focus on that, so it'll be much more efficient, because we're focusing on the people who we know have a problem that we can meaningfully solve, and they'll be happy and they'll get benefit from using our solution. So then you can set that as your goal and then make sure that that's happening post the project.
I love that. And I've had some experiences recently which don't have necessarily the outcome in mind. They just kind of start, and it's a totally different approach. It's, let's see where this goes, and let's kind of figure out along the way, which I totally support, but without that like this is what we're going to be doing with it, and this is the destination. Like, frankly, I feel lost in those projects because I do need to. I typically will reverse engineer something versus the opposite, just the way that I think. So that's great advice. I'm gonna switch directions one last time on
Sure.
this call, but I want to chat with you a little bit about AI. There's been so much going on out there in the world, and you have an intimate understanding of a lot of different areas of technology having to do with marketing and cybersecurity and many other areas. What is your take, just in general, on what the world's going to look like in 5 years? Who are the winners and losers going to be? Not specific companies, but just in general, are they going to be companies we've never heard of before? Two people in a garage. Are we gonna go through that again? And the next multi-trillion-dollar company. Where are we going in your mind?
Yeah, it's so hard to know. I do 100% believe that AI is going to be more impactful than we can imagine. And I hear from a lot of people like, oh no, it's not really going to be that impactful, or they're much more excited about superconducting computing. But I remind people that you want superconducting computing so you can run software on it that does AI more efficiently, right? I mean, so it's really the AI. You always build your computing power because you want to run software on it, right? So I think that AI is going to have I can't even imagine all the impacts. And I think what we'll see is similar to we have with other things. We will see some new major companies emerge. I'm not sure who they will be, but I think we'll see some really big new players emerge. But we'll also see some of the already, super large companies, the Microsofts, the Googles, who are already on top of this, continue to dominate because they've gotten ahead of this trend and are really setting the pace, I think, on a lot of these things. So I think we'll see this mix. I think in the sales and marketing arena, it's going to be explosive. I mean, just explosive. I have no idea who's going to win that. I wouldn't necessarily say that the large players, particularly in sales and in marketing, are vastly ahead in this space, but my guess is they will over time acquire. But I am just seeing an explosive number of companies emerge. They won't all succeed, but there are some big ways that this is going to impact sales and marketing, and it will get adopted. There's just no question in my mind that it will happen.
And where do you think the low-hanging fruit is in sales and marketing? So it's such a big space. There's so many different aspects of sales and marketing technology, but is it on the content creation side? Is it on optimization, which I guess would kind of be the same thing? Where do you see kind of the first line of change happening? It already has. Let's face it. It already has.
I would say yes,
Second
yes, and
line,
yes.
Yeah. Where do you think? If you were to phase out, right?
I mean, I think in sales we'll see a couple things. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of them now. I mean, I think we will see AI come in as a super assistant to sales and do a lot of the things that sales hates to do, and their managers are always bugging them to do, like update their CRM, create a win-loss report themselves, or whatever it might be. That do these things like, why did I win? Why did I lose? Even sometimes companies ask the salespeople to just write those up, even if it's not getting it directly from the customer, call summaries, things like that. I think we'll see a lot of that. So sort of a super sales assist. I think we'll start to see some really interesting things in enablement. I've seen companies that have created pretty good avatars for role play. I've seen things that are built to help ensure salespeople are following whatever sales methodology or process you believe in, which doesn't always happen. Things that are going to prompt salespeople, to adjust how they're even talking to a customer. So I think we're going to see a ton of interesting things there. And then, yes, I think we'll see things around optimization, helping you know which opportunities you should be focusing on, personalization, helping you automate much more personalized outreach to your customers and prospects. And explosively, the same things will be happening in marketing. A lot more automation, content creation. I don't think in the near term it eliminates the need for creative people, but it reduces some of the work that they're doing and helps them be even more productive. I mean, people are doing it today, getting AI to draft the first draft, draft that first draft, or do idea generation for them, or edit, a document that they've written, help create the creative assets that they need, the visuals, especially if it's not a super high-end piece. They might just use AI to do it. So it's going to be pretty explosive in terms of how it gets used, I think.
Yeah, it's exciting and terrifying at the same time. And we recently at Clue had an AI day where every associate was, left free to explore whatever AI capability they wanted to. And we're starting to see some of the reward of that effort come through, and it's pretty cool. Like, there's just so much out there, and for a whole company to come together and find, down select these really interesting capabilities. One of the things that I did was found this is, I don't know, good or bad, but I found an AI tool to replicate my voice. And then I was able to read the win-loss reports with the avatar voice. So you could press play and just, instead of reading the report, you can just listen to the report in my voice or somebody else's voice, which I thought was pretty cool, right? It was so quick to set up.
You could have it read by The Rock,
That's right. That would be much better. I'm going to have to work on that one next. Yeah, celebrity voices. That would make it so much more interesting. You're right. Cool. Well, I know that we're just kind of about out of time here, so I'm going to toss one last question to you. I'd love to get your advice just to people who are at the leadership level looking at exploring things like win-loss data to drive change. How would you recommend they start thinking about getting going with something like this if they don't have it today?
Yeah, I would start at that moment of, why do you want to do it? What are you hoping to learn? What information are you expecting to get, and how will that impact your decision making? Like, what decisions might you make of that? And to your point earlier, where sometimes people just do it and then they see what comes of it. In addition to having that initial objective for why you want to do it, you got to be open, because you might learn things you weren't expecting, or you might find ways to use it that you weren't initially anticipating. For example, you might not even be thinking that the problem is you're targeting completely wrong customers, and then suddenly through the win-loss data, you're like, oh, the problem is we're talking to the wrong people. Like, these are not people who would even be most likely to benefit from our solution. And I think that's really important. And I think if you use the why, you will be able to get other people on board to doing it, because everything you do as a business takes some level of effort, time, it's time, people, money, right? So if you're clear about what you're hoping to get out of something and what that return on the investment is going to be for doing it, it's much easier to get people rallied around and understanding why you want to do it, how it's going to benefit the company, how it might even benefit them in their particular roles, and get on board and get it done.
Sage advice. Sage, wise advice, and a great way to end this episode of Blind Spots. Carol, thank you so much for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of your summer in the beautiful part of Boston that you live in, and we'll connect again soon.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. It was a pleasure.
Now.
Bye.